Eco Talks, which is our sort of weekly seminar series at the Earth Common. So we are an extension of the Earth Commons program, and our goal is to bring interesting speakers like this week on environment and sustainability here at Georgetown. And so if you haven't done so already, please check out our website. We have all of our speakers for the semester, and we will also soon be inviting speakers for next semester down on Capitol campus. So if you have suggestions for people that you want to come to Georgetown and give talks, please keep an eye out for that email, because we ask for suggestions from everybody in our community. So if you're a student, if you're a postdoc, if you're faculty, if you're any part of our staff, you are welcome to suggest a speaker. So with that, I will hand it over to Sarah to introduce our speaker for today. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome to see you all. I've known Professor Shizuka for a very long time. I'll just tell you that she did her undergraduate at Carleton, for a PhD at Oxford University. She was a postdoc at University of Wisconsin in Madison. We both taught at Oberlin in 2000. She's been a AAAS fellow, where she worked at the EPA. She has run a Kyoto program through Smith, right? She taught at Smith College, which is also my alma mater, and received tenure there, but then moved to Trinity Washington, and where she's been since 2012. She's had such a long slew of awards that I just cherry picked a few. The Dreyfus Teacher Scholar, she got a Marshall, right, and a Goldwater, which are probably all many of you.
That was a long time ago.
That's okay. She's going to tell you what she's been doing since then, and it's a really interesting story. We got the opportunity to teach in the Equitable Societies course in the psychology department, which is where I first learned about some of the recent work that Shizuka's been doing. And I hope you'll enjoy this as much as I did. Thank you for
Sarah,
coming,
thank
Shizuka.
you so much. I don't get out very often from Trinity to talk to large groups of folks. So I'm more comfortable in the classroom. Please feel free to raise your hand at any point during this, because otherwise I might just not know what to do with myself. So today what we're going to talk about is work that I've been doing since 2012. And that has been with communities here in DC. Here we are in DC. You can tell what the color code is on this map. Yes, this is a 2010 map, but it really shows, right, how the eastern half of the city has traditionally been predominantly Black. You'll also notice on that map, the industrial zoned parts of DC, 50% of the industrial zone land is within Ward 5. So the folks that I'm going to be working with are the people who are impacted by, right, disproportionately pollution from industry and from traffic. I am currently at Trinity, an all-women's college. We are 95% African-American Latina. Median household income 25,000. So we are serving some of the least resource parts of DC. That's where our students are actually coming from. I love teaching in the liberal arts college, and there we are also in Ward 5. Today's objective for me is to deliver to you 4 stories of folks I've been working with in Ivy City, Brentwood, Buzzard Point, and back to Ivy City. But I want to do that in a way that generates a lot of questions and input from you, because I would love to have a dialogue about this. These are messy problems. Chemists don't like messy problems, but here we are. So Ivy City, some of you may have heard of it. When I got to know them, they were in a quest to fight a tourist bus parking lot. And this already was a neighborhood that housed industries and warehouses, DC's snowplows and heavy vehicle, right? They are parking in that area as well. And the idea was for using the land around this, one of the first schools for Blacks in DC. They were going to use the land around that as a bus parking lot so that the air quality at Union Station would be better, because the buses wouldn't idle there. They would idle up in Ivy City, and then they would. So what you have to do that kind of a process, of course, there's going to be, right, permitting. And within that process, there was an environmental impact assessment. A lot of the lawsuits were centered around the communications between DC and the community and whether or not that environmental impact statement, right, was actually sound. So what did the folks actually do? The folks from DC used, credible EPA models. This many buses, this much traffic, this is how much the pollution will go up. In fact, this is how much the PM 2.5 will go up. Now, let's just say that Ivy City has the same PM 2.5 as at the nearest monitoring station. The monitoring stations with federally equipment methods, federal methods are few and far between. Let's just say it's the same, add those two together, it's under the regs, good to go. Do you see a problem with that assumption? Oh, good. I'm glad you did, because that is indeed the case. So I got involved with this in 2012 when I walked into the University of Maryland Public Health Department. I'm like, Jacoby Wilson, what are you doing here? I had met him when I was a AAAS fellow, and he said, yeah, I just moved here. And by the way, and I said, well, how do I get involved? And he said, well, there are these folks in Ivy City who want some air quality monitoring to demonstrate to the city that their air is already bad. I said, okay, that's great. So I walk over to Russ Dickerson, who's, a big guy in atmospheric chemistry, atmospheric modeling and all that kind of stuff. Like, hey, Russ, can I borrow some equipment? He lent me a black carbon monitor, and I had a piece of equipment that I actually brought from Smith. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to set these up in Ivy City. We did 6 months of monitoring, and my colleague Amanda Northcross, formerly at George Washington University, put together this slide where she was able to demonstrate that if you take the data that we have and combine it with modeling, you can see that all of the DC monitors are indeed having PM 2.5 levels, right, that she would project to be below the EPA next. At the time, of course, they've gone down further. There are now at 9. Good thing. But Ivy City substantially higher, right? So that really then brings us to the lesson that came out of this and the results. So the good news, but good news always comes with bad news, but the good news overall for us was that combining this along with real advocacy work, right, and working with lawyers, they were able to get enough voice out there for the mayor eventually to say, no, let's scrap that. Let's not use it as a bus parking lot. So the idea now is for it to actually have a community center. I'm afraid to tell you that it is still boarded up, but there are plans in the work to make that into a community center. Lessons learned, right? This is hard for me because there's so many things that I learned from the community, and I tried to pick one for each one. Ask me about more, I'm gonna tell you about more. So this one, for me, was pointing out something that is really obvious now, which is you can't use, right? You can't assume uniform concentrations. There are going to be pollution hotspots like Ivy City. When we actually, put this out there, the reviewers were sort of like, oh no, health studies, we need to actually be careful about this. And as you all know, those of you, anybody have a purple air monitor in their house or in their local vicinity, and you check the site, right? Hyper-local monitoring is a thing because we now have low-cost monitors, but it's using those tools and, how do we actually use them? But the point of this is, yeah, those tools are really, really necessary. We need monitoring on the ground. Second. Yeah, oh, thank you so much. I feel better already.
So, so you found that air pollution was already over the recommended sort of limit for Ivy City, which stopped the buses from going in.
Well, it didn't stop it, but it contributed.
Or contributed to that.
Yes.
But I assume that's still the case. So why is Ivy City's air so bad? And are there other things that the city and the citizens can do to fix that?
There is lots that citizens can do to fix air in Ivy City. In fact, I'll be looping back around to Ivy City because Ivy City has so much industry. This was their first target. Their next target is the one on the last slide. So if you can bear with me, I have all sorts of ideas, things to do. So I'm going to be chronological. And I thought, okay, I've got these monitors. I've got access to stuff from Russ. I've got this monitor from Smith. At that time, purple airs were not available. And I got a call from Rhonda Hamilton. Rhonda Hamilton here, living in Buzzard Point. And Buzzard Point, right, is towards the south. There's a whole bunch of public housing complexes, and they are surrounded by auto body shops, 2 concrete batching plants, and tons of construction, because all of those apartments right on South Capitol, they're all in their neighborhood. They had Nat Stadium go up, and when I started talking to them, that's when Audi Field Stadium, any soccer fans here? Right? Audi Field Stadium. That's when they were constructing on contaminated land, right, left by Pepco, which is your electrical company. So I start my monitoring and I figure, okay, this will be cake. I just take a whole bunch of monitoring data. I take it over to Amanda. We show that it's exceeded EPA levels, and that's going to give people the data that they need to advocate for change. I kept on going back to Rhonda. Like, Rhonda, there's no exceedance of EPA levels, right? So I felt like I completely let the community down, right? This is the data that would have helped them advocate, and I am not able to produce it. I'm a scientist. So then you ask the question of, well, does that mean that the air is safe? EPA says it's below the threshold. EPA says it's safe. So then you go talk to the community, and my colleagues, Dr. Harrison and Dr. Phoenix did a small sampling, but interviewed people to find out if they had been diagnosed with asthma, talked to them about their symptoms, and actually found out that there was a large portion of folks, 5% of our survey respondents, had no asthma diagnosis, but they had all of the symptoms of asthma. So combining that with the 38% who had asthma diagnoses, we're way above, right, the DC average. The community knows, right, that its air quality is bad. The community knows when they have asthma attacks. The community knows that the clouds of dust that are coming from the concrete batching plants and are coming from the construction all around them, they know that those are not healthy. They can't open their windows during the day. They feel like prisoners in their own homes. There's a disconnect here, right? So that's where, right, at least the lesson was learned for me. If the data, right, are not within EPA's exceedances, what's wrong with EPA? That's the question, right, that we should actually be asking. And how do I present this data in a way that actually can hopefully give them, right, some leverage? So what I started paying attention to was not the PM 2.5, but the PM 10, because PM 10 is larger than PM 2.5 in terms of particulate matter, and that means that it falls in a smaller radius than PM 2.5, which scatters all the way out there. And what do those PM 10 levels look like? So I looked at the daily, which is the top up there, the daily PM 10, and wow, this is what's wrong with EPA. The WHO limit, right, for 24-hour average of PM 10 is 50. Do you know what it is in the United States? 100. We're changing standards all the time. There is no bright line. And is there a bright line between PM 2.5 and PM 10 anyway? Because, PM 4, PM 5, right? What, those are not bad for you, and PM 2.5, right, really is. There's questions about speciation, like what is it actually made out of? And in this case, it's going to be a lot of silica and a lot of stuff that's coming off of rock. So that was one thing that I wanted to point out. The second thing I pointed out was that we could use something that DC actually put in place itself. For Audi Field Stadium, they had, and this is the first time I've seen this working with the district, they actually had measures for mitigation. So there was real-time monitoring happening at the Audi Field construction site. And if PM 10, measured by the same instrument that I had, exceeded 100 micrograms per meter cube in a 15-minute average, construction was supposed to stop. They were trying to figure out what the source was. Half the time it was actually concrete batching plants, but they were supposed to stop. Okay, so what happens if I apply that same standard to my monitor data? And my monitor were collected where? At the public, right? At the public housing apartment complex. What happens if I apply it there? So I looked at how many minutes per day that action level was actually achieved, given my instrument. And you can see that it's, several minutes per day. The ones with asterisks, those are July 4th events. Those are always very high for particulate matter. And then if you actually, count sort of the frequency of those events, you can see that it's quite often, and you're kind of saying to DC now, according to your standards, this is a condition that would cause construction to actually stop at the fence line of a construction facility. This is what it's like at an apartment. Is that okay? Now, again, I'm not saying that any of these data are actually, they're not. It's the community really, right? And it's the community and how they actually use these data. So I guess what I'm glad about is that I finally listened to the community. The community is telling me that the air is bad. EPA standards are telling me the air is not bad, right? Find a way to communicate what the residents are actually experiencing. And so since then, lots of papers on EPA shortcomings, and it's pretty, there's more science, right, that needs to be taken into account for those standards. And really using those to bring inequities to light. And I'm hoping, right, that this gives us more tools when we go to a hearing. And by the way, can I just point out that we have been concerned about this concrete batching plant permit because it expired in 2020. And it wasn't until June 2024 that there was actually a draft permit, for public comment. What happens in between? Do you think the facility has to stop? No, they can just keep on going. So, right, we need to push the government to actually do that permitting process, because that is one place where they can put into place things like real-time monitoring with mitigation, actually asking the facilities to do that kind of monitoring. Yes.
It sounds like there's, you mentioned the asthma rates, and I'm just wondering like how some of these things interact together between like ozone levels, like were you also monitoring ozone, and can those things, because they seem like they could be very synergistic when it comes to like if you're going to look at it from the outcome as opposed to just what's in the air.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I wish I could do more monitoring, and I am slowly amassing a set of tools so that I can do a lot of different kinds of monitoring, but that's absolutely true. And it's a reminder also that we need to think about cumulative impacts, right? Because it's not just the PM level being this close to threshold and the ozone level being this close to threshold. According to EPA, that's all equal or just as safe as somebody else, right? Having those levels be low. So yeah, the synergistic effect of all of that is definitely real. I mean, there's so much data about traffic related to asthma rates, but in this case, right, they've shown pretty clearly that since then, that the PM 2.5 really is not coming from traffic. It's not traffic. PM 2.5. Cynthia.
Related to that, I was just curious, are the monitors all outdoors? Do you have any data on indoor pollution?
That is also a very excellent question, because my colleague Valentina at American University is very interested in looking at indoor air. I have had community members at Buzzard Point really wanting more indoor air studies. So in that case, right, we can now have cheaper monitors. We can put one inside and outside, right, and see are the particulate matter on the outside actually, right, coming into the inside. Absolutely. And right, there's all these studies now with gas stoves. But pretty complicated too. Yes, good idea. Very good idea. Because these apartments, right, they have those window air conditioning units. Those fancy apartments that are in the same neighborhood, they have filtered air. Oh, right. So you live in the same place, but the air that you're breathing is not going to be the same.
Shizuka, I have another question.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
When you're doing these particulate matter studies, you alluded to the fact that like you have some idea if they're silicates or if there are other kinds of materials. But how does your monitor actually work? Right? Does it differentiate at all? And is it equally good if it's black carbon versus silica?
Yes, question. And the answer is there are so many different kinds of PM 2.5. Readings are so dependent on humidity because some, particulate matter is going to actually.
Yeah.
Yep. So it is complicated, and that is why I'm a chemist at heart. Speciation, man. I would love to do more of that. Hi, by the way, I guess I will need access to different equipment. So I'm glad you did ask about different types of PM 2.5 because that leads really beautifully into our more recent work. You'll notice this one and the 11.1 are sort of ongoing. And Brentwood, this is interesting to me. It's my understanding the history of this neighborhood, which is on the other side of the tracks from Ivy City, very close to it, that this was the white neighborhood. But as it started to become more and more black, white folks left. And then DC decided to start zoning it industrial. So I think there's no question about the chicken and the egg about first. Same thing in Ivy City, right? That was a historically black community. You can watch the maps as they go on. Industries start coming into that black community. This community, again, tons of different sources. And really, these are industrial sources right next to residences. And what's happening right now is there's a DC proposal to add a school bus parking lot. So what do we have here? I've got an asphalt plant, all to organic compounds in addition to everything else. I've got trash transfer. I mean, that's just noise, unpleasant, and trucks coming in and out. Auto body shops, trucks idling over here, very close to the residences all the time. That's what they tell me about. And garbage trucks as well, right? So we've got all of that happening on this corridor right here. You've got houses right there. So the idea is, hey, let's put the school bus terminal right here. The team on this is massive. And it's really exciting to see all of these people come together. But Teresa, who's the head of Empower DC, is just really good at bringing everybody together. I mean, I've got big people on here like Susan Amberg. Right? And so bringing us all together, we actually have quite a bit of data. I need to give a shout out to Miss Edwards. Sharon Edwards is the one who lives at the end of this block. She is hosting for me Black Carbon Monitor, PM 2.5 monitor, and a camera because I want to catch those trucks on film and correlate it with air pollution. So tons of data from this. That's exciting. Okay, I'll just start telling you about, did I turn it off? Maybe I turned it off. Did the power just go down? Don't panic. You're okay. So I'll just keep on telling you about the data that I do have. So Valentina Angela at American University, really good at data analysis. And what she did was she used all the purple air monitor all over DC, established a purple air monitor network within Brentwood, and was able to show that using that same type of instrument, right? We're not comparing apples to oranges, that using that instrument, that statistically PM 2.5 is higher. But then there's the question, right, of what is that PM 2.5 composed of? And so I got my hands on a black carbon monitor. Black carbon is a very small fraction of PM 2.5. Right? Dust, all sorts of other things, PM 2.5, aerosols. The black carbon is going to be a marker for what kind of activity we're talking about, such like looking stuff. What activity is going to give us black carbon? Combustion, diesel. It's a pretty good marker for diesel, right? And PM 2.5 could be coming from anywhere. It could be coming from wildfires in California. In fact, our PM 2.5, right, went up massively with Canadian fires. So if we want to actually get a handle on the local, right, what's happening locally, black carbon is going to be a really good tool. I saw a hint.
What that ratio of black carbon, for different species, or like, are you able to track where it comes from based on how much of that ratio is, that?
Yes, so you are way far advanced from where I am. There's folks who monitor carbon monoxide, right? Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and black carbon, right? So then you could really differentiate it. There's a bit of a problem because there's black carbon and there's brown carbon. So NIST is working on standardizing black carbon versus brown carbon. You want to monitor at 2 different wavelengths, right? So that you can actually start to distinguish between those, and then you can start to do some source apportionment as well. So there are methods out there. Have I done them? No.
So those purples are just measuring just the size of the particulate. There's nothing else.
The PM 2.5 is, and again, those are not federal methods that are being used, and so that data you cannot hold them in court. Black carbon is not regulated. Black carbon is not regulated, but in terms of health outcomes, you know, every increase in microgram per meter cubed of black carbon is going to have a higher impact on your health than just PM 2.5 in general. Are you surprised? That stuff is like a Brita filter material. What's your Brita filter trap? Oh, organic, right? All that carcinogenic like is on those little particles, and they're small enough to go into your bloodstream. That sounds like a vehicle for disaster to me. Yeah. So here's Valentina. Here's my student installing one of these little purple air monitors, right? That give you real-time data all over the place. And again, thank you, Valentina, for being a whiz with the stats. Yes. Sorry.
So, oh,
No? Yes.
yeah, so just to play this out, right? So let's say you capture the data and it crosses the threshold, right? Like, it's not like magically the monitoring devices are connected to the policymaking entity and suddenly everything shuts down and it all stops, right? So what happens after that? And I'm also kind of putting a footnote on the question of presuming that there might not be as robust federal engagement in these matters going forward. So like, what happens then if you actually got the data at a significant scale and it told the story that obviously the people are experiencing in their lives and you know, and their communities?
Thank you. Right. So we have to look for laws that actually have teeth, right? So Clean Air Act, right, says we can't have exceedances. But the problem is these are not federal, you know, methods. And because of that, they will completely dismiss them. So even if I'm able to show using this equipment, calibrated, right, do the best that I can, it holds no power support.
So where does, right, so where does it go? Like, how does the community then take those findings and leverage it in a way that might bring about change?
Absolutely, absolutely. You asked me this question earlier, and I think that, and I hope that people's testimonies, right, actually matter. So that picture that you saw earlier, of folks at, oh, where's the, oh, it's right there. Right, at this public hearing, they told their personal stories, right, about what it actually feels like to live there, what their health issues actually are, what they see day to day, which are those big clouds of particulate matter that I was trying to capture in terms of data, right? But accompanying with that, right, are their stories. So I go here, right, and I read out my data and tell them recommendations of permitting, how they can, you know, reduce and mitigate. But folks are also there, right, letting them know that room is packed, right? There was not one person from the company who spoke. The community. Right, so here we are, big folks, lots of data. Again, Valentina's data are useful in terms of showing inequities, right? But until there is an agency that is going to actually focus on inequities rather than the law of the Clean Air Act, is that useful? Maybe not. Similarly, we added black carbon monitoring because they told me it was trucks. They told me their problem was trucks. Okay, if your problem is trucks, then we should start to monitor black carbon. There are these really nice instruments that actually just collect it onto tape and then just figure out how black is it. These graphs are meant to emphasize particulate matter. Right? You don't really see a daily pattern in that particulate matter, do you? Again, it's coming from so many different sources, but if I really want to understand what the trucks are doing, this is going to be a better signature. Here's the weekend, right? And you see things go down here because there's more mixing in the atmosphere in the afternoon when things warm up. But what's this? What's this big peak happening at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? There's your rush hour traffic. And not only is black carbon able to show that print, but we're actually able to compare this with federal monitors because this is very close to a federal monitor in terms of its methodology. And you can see not only is black carbon higher, but the patterns look a little bit different. Miss Edwards is always telling me about how she has to call 311 because there's a truck idling in the middle of the night. Right, these refrigerated trucks, they have to idle all night long. She calls the police, they wake her up. She has to get up, pad down her pajamas, talk to the police, and like, she does this. She says she hasn't gotten sleep because she's doing this all the time. That's why I want my camera to do the work. Right, but you can see the signature of that in the sense that if you look at midnight, right, things dip down, right? Things should dip down on the weekend, but they do not. They do not where she lives. So again, if we can use data to actually increase enforcement, right, or mitigation strategies, that would be awesome. But that is something that we're advocating for. DC tells us they don't have enough staff and they're about to help use more. So now, where am I? Oh, great. So not only do we have those data to communicate to the Department of Energy and Environment, we also have, right, big people coming in doing satellite, right, and analysis of satellite data, modeling the same way that EPA would model how much more things are going to go up if you've got a new bus depot in the neighborhood. And, you know, even Susan Amberg and Dan Goldberg said, hey, there's a good chance that NOx, nitrogen oxides, are going to exceed standards. Don't you think we have a lot of data? What do we do with all this data now? Right? Because as we said, we don't have the kind of data to actually just stop something. So we have to get involved, right, in the public participation process. The first chance that we have had to talk to the DC Department of Energy and the Environment is through, again, the permitting process. What do they want a permit for? Well, the first permit that's coming through is for construction and operation of a gasoline dispensing system, right? They're putting in gasoline buses in this day and age when they could have been applying for federal money. So I think for me, the lesson here, right, and I was able to deliver, right, all of those data. The residents also came, told stories about how they moved to Brentwood and got sick once they got to Brentwood. People talked about what it's like, right, living with those trucks, Miss Sharon. So we've got a combination, right, of that storytelling and the data. Told them what Susan Amberg, I said, even Susan Amberg said, right? That name carries a lot of weight around here. So what is the lesson that I take away from this, right? The lesson for this, right, is one that we all know. Environmental justice is not about taking the facility from here and putting it in another neighborhood with disproportionate impacts. We have to change the way that we do things. That's sustainability. Sustainability is a core part of environmental justice. We don't want that anywhere, right? So what's good for the neighborhood, right, is good for everyone. What's bad for the neighborhood is bad for everyone. And if we have that kind of thinking, right, then we actually have to target that. So I think that was strengthening our argument, right, at the public hearing of not only, like, we're not now just trying to say, oh, air here is already so bad, you can't put another facility here, right? That used to be my argument. But I think now the argument is, WTF, DC, this is against your sustainability plan to put in another, you're putting money into a gasoline, right, infrastructure now? So lots of things to fight. Thanks. You have been an excellent audience. I have one more story. And again, please keep on interrupting, and I hope that you will have questions and stay for questions. I have been talking far too long. It is time for you to hear from the folks, right? From the folks I work with. This is Sabrina Rhodes, and I'm going to try to play this video. I don't know how to do that though.
See the cursor.
Oh, I see. Oh, well,
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah, and then
Like
put the
that?
cursor.
Oh, there
over
it
the-
is. Okay. All right. Thank you
just
all
switch
so much.
to-
I'll play about 5 minutes of this video, but this video is available online. If I were smart, I would have given you a QR. But all you have to do is Ivy City Rising. Ivy City Rising. Three. We're back in Ivy City, where we started. This is what's happening.
Okay, you might want to turn the volume on.
grandma, mama. So I've been so many things to my family. And now I'm still being the same thing, just in a different way. Somebody from one of the agencies said, I'm gonna start calling you G-Mom. Ivy City G-Mom, you Ivy City Grandma. I love making sure that everybody is all right.
This is a real community. Families.
It's like, oh, hell no. Like, no, we need to do something about this.
She's the one who led.
Ivy City is one of the most unique communities in the District of Columbia. It's really like a village. And when you look at the history of Ivy City, a community founded by and for Black people, you see so many repeated environmental injustices that the community was continuously having to fight against. The environmental racism is the systemic racism reflected in land use decisions. It gets into zoning. What is allowed on this site in Ivy City where there is a chemical facility next to, attached to somebody's residential home?
Body is lawyers and Tara, you see,
So it says here, the only manufacturer of type. The chemicals that they're using is dangerous to our skin, dangerous to our eyes. If it get in your nose, it's dangerous. And if it get inside your body, it affects your lungs. And that should be enough for the district to say, oh, we need to get rid of this place. Methylene chloride causes damage to organs through prolonged or repeated exposure. Focal type, skin burns, eye burns, heart damage, kidney damage, liver damage, respiratory system damage, eye damage. Yep, this is ridiculous. I saw this, I'm like, oh my goodness. Hey, Sean. Yeah, we just wanted to talk about, the things with the chemical plant. And how have your children been doing? What's going on over there?
I lived in Abbey City for 15 years. So I started out in Abbey City apartment. And then I moved here 10 and a half years ago in this house. I was never informed that I lived next to a chemical plant when I bought my house. Since living here, I have lost my smell. My kids complain about headaches. My son have to miss days of sleep when their migraines are too bad. And I have another son who has very severe asthma. And I know that his asthma flares up when he's home. And when he's not home, his asthma is in control. Each child that slept in the room that's closer to their vent on the top of their roof, they all had a learning disability. And the older ones didn't have any issues until we moved in the house. As a mother, I'm very angry because I just feel like sometimes that I make the right decision by moving around here. I thought I was putting my kids in a better environment, but really I put them in harm. It's actually connected to my share a wall. So I just feel like that makes me want to fight harder for them.
hope you'll go back and watch the rest of the video. Furthermore, her sons went off to college, their skin problems went away, they came home, they came back, right? So how do you go about proving that the chemical facility next door is the cause of this? Since then, they have also found cracks in the wall between the facility and the home. But DOE says they can't do indoor air testing. So this facility has bothered me for a long time. In 2012, 2013, when I first started working in Ivy City, there was no signage on the door. I could tell that there were chemicals in there because the garage doors were wide open and I could see barrels, gallon, right? What are these 40-gallon drums? Smell, right? Chemically smell, tar taste in my mouth. All I knew was that Parisa said, I think it's an adhesives factory. Chemists, what do you look for when you have an adhesives factory? First thing you think of?
Chlorinates.
I didn't go for that. I went straight for formaldehyde. I went straight for formaldehyde and I did a 1-hour test and sure enough, I got like, 22 micrograms per meter cubed of formaldehyde, which actually, if you are exposed to that 24/7, you have a 1 in 10,000 cancer risk. So I was like, this isn't good, right? But it wasn't until more recently when Ms. Bree came around, she was like, no, we gotta really do something about this. So by that time, things had changed. There was signage on the door and things weren't open all the time. And I found the website because I found out the name of the facility, National Engineering Products. I go there and I download the MSDSs and I'm like, the MSDS forms are telling me about methylene chloride, phenols, crysols, and it listed hazards upon a release, upon combustion or release of phosgene. What's that? Mustard gas, warfare agent. In 2018, there was a fire. The family had to be evacuated from their home. We FOIA'd and got pictures from the fire department. There was chemical stuff all over. So this stuff is really dangerous. It's highly flammable, right? And this is in a home. So you're probably thinking, well, that shouldn't be allowed, shouldn't there be laws to protect us here? Okay. First, a facility like this should not be within 100 feet of a residence. Sharing a wall. What happened? Well, it's grandfathered in, right? It's been here so long, we can't tell it that it can't do that. The house that Miss Sean was talking about, she purchased that on an affordable housing program, and she is locked into a 15-year, like she cannot sell her house. You should know about this, right? And I've had people say to me, like, what do you mean? Couldn't she tell that there was something, going on there? I mean, she lived in Ivy City. There's a lot of industry around, and I think people have trust, right, that nobody would ever do something like that. Yeah. So the other thing, they're operating without an air quality permit. In fact, when we went to Department of Energy and Environment, they said, oh, we didn't even know about that facility. So what they're doing now, right, is they're trying to see whether or not it's a permit, right? This process has been very, very prolonged. And there's a whole legal team working on trying to find a way for relief from Ms. Scott, right? She should not have to live there with their family, right? And also for the residents of Ivy City. Oh. Not bad. No, but I don't want to show that one. Okay, great. So data. It turns out in this case that federal folks and DC folks actually collected data. So that's awesome, right? I didn't have to collect my own data and have it be questioned. Their data. So the data that they collected included a slew of chemicals. I'm only gonna highlight their formaldehyde data. They sent it to me in just tables with redacted text when I asked for it. So I mapped it out, given everything I could find in there. And this is what it looks like. On the production floor, 39 and 48. That's measurements indoor in terms of micrograms meter cubed, 8-hour average of formaldehyde. And outside that 110, that's right at a vent. And then you've got formaldehyde also in the community. So DOE pointed out that this was a problem. And they said, we need more data to figure out what to do. Have you heard that before? We need more data? Oh, yes, right? They've been doing it since the tobacco industry, et cetera. So the community has been very patient. I do want to point out that that 110 micrograms per meter cube is an event that is right above my head on the sidewalk. Right? So this is very much in the community, and there are levels found in the community that are relatively high. So I was relieved when EPA Region 3 stepped up, right? They're a step above DOE. And I cannot tell you how puzzled I am about how this has happened. They, first of all, went out to collect data all over Ivy City and didn't even look for formaldehyde. even though it was known at that time that the facility used it and was emitting it. And this is what they said in the newspaper in April of 2024. NEP's emissions are not expected to result in any adverse health effects. In other words, we didn't find anything. I said you didn't look, but we didn't find anything. So they managed. Oh yeah, they managed to actually do some formaldehyde monitoring. That data I think is a bit controversial. That field blanks actually have readings. So if I subtract the field blanks, it still is reading, right, pretty high, 17 micrograms per meter cubed, where 22 is the limit for 1 in 10,000 cancer risk, and where 10 is actually the non-cancer risk. And so then we take those and say, hey, Jinty, you did these measurements. And their response is, well, that's only if those RSLs and levels that we have, they only count if people are exposed to that every day, right? All the time. And this is facilities only operating a couple times a month. 1, 2, we can't really prove that formaldehyde is from there because there's so many other sources of formaldehyde. And exactly, it's true, there is more formaldehyde. In fact, there was a Johns Hopkins thing that said that the second producer of formaldehyde is Ivy City Rail Yard, right? So you've got formaldehyde here for multiple reasons. This facility, according to the data analysis that I have done, is contributing significantly to that. But at this point, nothing's happening. So what on earth is my take-home lesson from this? Please help me out. Existing laws, right, are not going to help communities. Oh, right, grandfathering in. Let's just keep on doing the same racist stuff that we've been doing all along because that used to be the way that it was. Right? We actually need to change the laws. I think the sustainability piece is here as well. Like, what are we doing, Navy? Do we have to use this kind of sealant? Can't you find something made by a mollusk that's going to be, effective? Chemists get to work on that, right? And I think really where we are now is we're going to try to look for power around. So thank you so much for asking the first question about what actually can be done. There's a lot that can be done because there is legislation coming down the pike, although, it's DC. So even if DC decides to do this, this will be whatever. But, right, we can still start to make some progress while everything's down. Zachary Parker has put through 2 things. 1, environmental justice legislation, right? If you feel like you want to support that so that cumulative impacts are actually taken into account, that facilities, when they actually want permits in areas that are already designated to have overburdened industry, right? Overburdened with industry. If you want to support that, that is one thing that you can support. I'm not telling you to do this, but I'm saying.
Just clarifying, he's the Ward 5 council
Yes.
member.
Yes, thank you very much. And the other piece that he's done is to say, Mayor, you have the power of eminent domain. You can say, we need this piece of land to make a community resilience hub. That's what belongs here. And so that is the direction, right, in which we're going. And so the end of the story, right, is that there's so many lessons learned. The data can help support, right, the residents' cause. But really, these lessons that everybody has taught me are just part of the bigger picture. You all are, right, the commons, because it's not just scientists, right, who are going to solve this problem. In fact, it's very, very much so people on the ground who are doing this. So thank you for letting me share the things that I've learned, right, that we need to document spatial inequalities. I need to really listen to the community and make sure that the data, right, are actually consistent. I need to go beyond EPA standards, and I need to actually look at things like black carbon that aren't even monitored. And again, you're all doing the right thing by pushing for sustainability, because that's going to make things better for everybody. Folks have taught me a lot of lessons. I have a lot of people to thank, and there are so many more lessons that I have learned from working with communities. They have taught me so much. And so I hope I can share some of that. Thank you. Yay! You?
So I sent a picture of your slide to my friend who lives in this.
Oh,
And she said one of the worst things for them, in addition to the trucks idling, which is number one, was all of the volatile organic carbons coming off of the tar silo.
yes,
Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I hadn't really heard about that.
yes.
Like, what do we know about that? What are those?
Volatile organic compounds, right, are all those airborne chemicals that might have smell, might not have smell. Some of them are very toxic, some of them are totally benign. So what kind of monitoring can you do to actually capture that kind of thing? It is very hard, right? You can do a total volatile organic compound measurement, but even that instrument is, much more sensitive to ethanol than it is, to benzene. So how are you gonna try to disaggregate that? I am starting to do more volatile organic sampling, right, and analysis in GCMS because I actually think that needs to be monitored more regularly rather than, a couple times a month, which is really what is happening because that's all that the agencies can actually afford. I am actually really curious to hear and because I need more monitoring.
Yeah, I can connect them.
Yes, that is absolutely wonderful. But that was, again, one of the arguments. What do VOCs do in the atmosphere? Not only are some of them harmful, right, but they're ozone precursors. NOx. So again, another argument to DOE is, hey, we're not in compliance for ozone. You've got this VOC, right? This VOC in Brentwood from Apple plant. And in fact, I have data to show that. But now you're about to put in the gasoline infrastructure. Oh, that's pure VOCs, right? All of those fumes that one smells when one is at the gasoline station, those are your VOCs, and some of them are pretty nasty, like benzene.
Just to add a comment to that.
Oh, yeah,
some of
thank
the
you.
larger VOCs can also lead to
Okay,
PM2.5.
absolutely.
So there's that connection. Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think in your second story, you showed a graph showing PM10
Uh-huh.
exceeding WHO standard, even though not US. And then you showed the level of action, right?
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be kind of a correlation, but I'm thinking you also have asthma data. It might be interesting to see how asthma activity correlate with that PM10 if there's no direct relation to PM2.5.
Yeah.
Kind of a multivariable analysis can give it more.
Yeah, and this is really up to the community. I have worked, told them many times, the data are only right as good. Or I should say, you have data. The data that you have is actually the most valuable data, right? The data that Ms. Sharon takes when she calls at 311 has documented another truck, right? If I can correlate that with black carbon levels going up, I've got a little bit more of a fingerprint there. Same thing, I've asked, right, them, can you document, right, days when your asthma levels are high? People sometimes use emergency visits and things like that. But if it came from the community, you're absolutely right. It would be so much more meaningful. Their lives are already so busy and so stressful. And ask, yeah. But I think the message, right, I do need to keep on convincing them that is powerful. Yes, 1 and 2. Yes.
Do you have information on like what the age breakdown is of these neighborhoods? Like, do you very high percentage of young children or very high percentages of the elderly, and does that matter in advocacy work? Like, it's not just, everyone is not susceptible in the same way. Like some people we are, causing health problems that they'll have for the rest of their life or end of their life, right? Surely.
Great toxicologist right here, right? One of the first things we teach our students, right, and bring up that point of vulnerable populations and buzzard point, I do have all the demographic data that go with these health points, and it's primarily elderly and children. Yeah. There was, oh yeah. Does that answer your question?
So it seems on the one hand, laws and EPA standards are insufficient to capture this. And on the other, it's community-driven action. I was wondering if there's a way to scale up with chemists creating gadgets that will get these, or procedures that can be scaled up for communities that might not be so fortunate to have chemists available or organized collective.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole movement right? A whole movement of low-cost monitoring happening. And the idea is you get a high density, like those purple air, right, sensors, you get a high density. And even if those instruments individually, right, are noisier, right, less precision, and less accuracy than a federal monitor, right, that you can actually start to see patterns and use those patterns to advocate for change, right? Because we want to actually be able to say, hey, or have data to say it's the idling trucks, or data to say this is the time of day, right, when this is actually happening. Send out enforcement during this time of day, right? So yes, there are huge movements for low cost monitoring. On the other hand, I have to say, right, that those data don't hold up in court for EPA if they're only concerned legally with Clean Air Act until somebody is actually interested in equity. It's very hard for that to actually get response. I think also there's a problem with those because they only monitor a few pollutants, right? And so do you say your air is good just based on PM 2.5 and ozone levels, NOx, when you've got high VOCs, which could potentially, right, be hazardous to your health. So I don't want to get people to think that their air is cleaner than it actually is, vice versa. Yeah. So, but I think that's the direction that things are going, a lot more crowdsourcing, right? Did you have a question? Because I remember it was either you or Randall who was going to ask a question. No? Oh, sorry to put you on the spot. Anybody else want to be put on the spot? Dr. Shizuka?
Just to expand a little bit on what you were just talking about, though, because that sounds like citizen science
Right.
project to me, and I'm just wondering, do you have any experience with doing that, thinking about that, and some of the pros and cons?
So the reason that I have not gone into this, although I have had students who've worked with folks at Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, right, to make these low-cost monitors, is because the community told me, we don't want that. We don't want that because EPA doesn't listen to it. You want stuff that EPA is going to believe because they are so tired of being told that their data are not good. So it's hard. Now, I don't want to sell them. You know, sometimes we've got people coming in like, oh, we'll monitor this stuff for you. And then I'll tell them like, no, that's really not a really good piece of equipment. Like, we sold a bill of goods. They told us they could help us. Right? Yes, that's right. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, so I think it was your first few slides, you were talking about how people in Ivy City have the symptoms of asthma, but they're not getting diagnosed. Is that a problem with access to healthcare or not being taken seriously in healthcare settings, or what do you think would be?
Right. I do not know. We do have data to show that most of them have primary care physicians and most of them have insurance. But that is a very, very good question. Am I out of time? I am.
Great though.
Oh, I had so much fun. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really honored to be here at Georgetown. It's fun doing the good work that you do.